Good evening, everybody. I think we are live. Brother Boslis, I'm turning it over to you.
Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you guys for tuning in from wherever you are. We appreciate your time and efforts and participating in our Black History series. We have a great guest today, man. It's one of our frat brothers. He's LE68. And we're just gonna ask him a few questions about his time frame being at the HBCU doing segregated times and how it was growing up in segregated times. And we're just gonna let him use his platform to show everyone how he grew up during a tough time and being an Omega man.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. First things first, before we get started, we just invite you all to please be sure to share this live. We are live on our Facebook page, Omega Chi 57. You can follow us on Instagram and also on our YouTube channel at Omega Chi 1957. We are also streaming live from the Omega Sci-Fi 7D Facebook page as well too. So a lot of ways that you can tune in to keep up with what's going on, and we just want to just go ahead and just make sure that you all continue to support us as we continue this efforts over the next few weeks or so. So we are excited to welcome our guest. He is a mentor, a good friend of mine, and of course my fraternity brother, which I'm proud to call. Brother Madison, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, doing great. Brother Petaway, Brother Marshall.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. First and foremost, thank you so much for coming on tonight. We appreciate you. Guess I just kind of get things started just a little bit for our viewers out there. Can you sort of kind of tell us a little about who you are?
Sure. My name is Major Edward Madison Jr. I say that because sometimes we forget how much is wrapped up in a name. I was the first male child born to my parents, Major E. Madison Sr. and Annie Ruth Lewis Madison. So they put the tag on me, Junior. I'm sure you, as a first son in your nuclear family, Brother Petaway, can identify with the surname and labels. I grew up in Mobile, Alabama. My parents were from Baldwin County, Alabama, and my dad was born in, he says, somewhere in the neighborhood of Gee's Bend or Possum Bend, Alabama. That's Wilcox County, Alabama, for those of you who are not as initiated with Alabama geography. And I grew up in Mobile in a household with, at varying times, 10 other children. I say varying times because being the fourth child out of 11, when some of my brothers and sisters came along, I was already in high school and off to college and didn't get to spend much time around them. Being born into a family with a lot of women kind of shaped me in a way that's interesting because I was determined not to be seen as a mama's boy or hang out with my sisters too much. So I hung out with some male cousins of mine, played a lot of baseball, wasn't tall enough or fast enough or shot well enough to be, played a lot of baseball. I wasn't big enough or tall enough or fast enough to play a lot of football and basketball, but I played a lot of baseball. And I hung out at the recreation center, which is where we got to see people that you don't think about growing up as noteworthy necessarily, but who sometimes later on in life you find out were very noteworthy. Guys like Amos Otis, with whom I went to high school. His nickname was Gigi. Amos Otis wound up playing center field for the Kansas City Royals in Kansas City, Missouri, all the way from Williamson High School in Mobile. We played baseball together. He was a little bit better than me, so he wound up going a lot farther than I did. Hank Aaron, Henry Aaron, grew up in the Maysville area. He's actually from a small place called Plateau, just outside of Mobile. And then there were quite a few others. Richard Castor. Richard Castor was a high school classmate of mine. He wound up catching passes from Joe Willie Namath and the New York Jets. So it's amazing that sometimes we don't realize we're among greatness, and even sometimes that we too are infused with greatness. How we choose to allow it to shape us, or if we choose to allow it to shape us, is the question. But Mobile gave me my start. My high school principal, Lemuel K. Keeby, was a Tuskegee graduate, and somehow the other I wound up matriculating at Tuskegee Institute, which is now Tuskegee University. Mr. Keeby was an awesome guy. I remember typing in high school the summer after I graduated from high school, mainly because my girlfriend was in the typing class. She was a year behind me. And it gave me a little bit extra time with her that summer before I went off to college. Mr. Keeby found out I was in the typing class and said, Madison, Sonny, you're too smart to be sitting around here just taking this one class. You're going to take English. I said, Mr. Keeby, I don't need an English class. I graduated valedictorian of my high school class. He said, Sonny, you can never learn enough. There's no such thing as too much learning. And he himself, personally, my principal, my high school principal, taught me advanced English, as he put it. And it helped me. It helped me to become a better communicator, a better writer, a better person. But the thing about growing up in the 1950s and 60s in Mobile was that we learned to enjoy what we had, whatever that was. I remember taking planks of wood, carving out a section, tying a rubber band around the end, and taking a flat piece of wood that came with an ice cream cup and sticking the scoop from the ice cream cup, the wooden scoop, between two pieces of rubber, tightening the rubber, flipping the paddle till we put it in the ditch. And there was a ditch at first. There were not always paved streets, fellas. There was a ditch in front of my house for a while. We would put the wooden piece of wood with the rubber and the ice cream stick on the end of it in the water in the ditch and turn it into a boat. We played marbles. We made our own kites. Most people didn't have enough money to buy kites. We made our own kites when we got sticks and tissue paper from the store, little tissue paper from the store. Took flour and water and made glue and made our own kites. Took rags, tore them into strips, tied the rags onto some string at the bottom of the kite to make a tail. The tail gave the kite more ballast that would help you to better control it. That's how I grew up, learning to enjoy what was in my surrounding. And another reason that was so important is because Mobile was the kind of city on the Gulf Coast where there was a lot of rain, a lot of greenery, and a lot of fruit. I used to walk around Maysville, Mobile, and neighbors and friends and family members had plum trees, mulberry trees, pear trees. My godmother had banana plants in her yard. Her name was Dora Pullum. She had banana plants in her yard. So they grew bananas. Blackberries. You could walk almost anywhere where there was anything close to approaching a field that might have been a little untended and pick blackberries. Scuppernons, which are just wild grapes, basically. Pecans, plums. These things grew naturally. And I wonder how people grew up who didn't see those things, because I don't know where they got them or if they got them sometimes, if they had to go to the store and buy all of this stuff. We thought it nothing bad about sneaking a couple of plums off of a neighbor's plum tree. And they didn't call the police on us because we ripped off a couple of plums. They knew we were kids. And as long as we didn't eat every plum on the whole tree, we didn't get into trouble. We just didn't. It was that kind of community, that kind of caring and sharing, and people looking out for each other. That's one of the things I really miss about growing up. And it was not just Mobile. I think it was the times, 50s and 60s, because there was a lot going on. Civil rights movement, Vietnam War, a lot of student protest. That's one of the things, a couple of other things that helped shape my life, especially in college. I wound up at Tuskegee taking ROTC and physical education my first 2 years because those were two of the mandatory courses. And because they were mandatory courses, every able-bodied male who had not been into the military or who didn't have a 4F classification, for those of you who don't know what a 4F classification was, it was a way you stayed out of the Vietnam War because you were considered physically somehow unable to be in a position to represent your country in the military. A 4F classification in the 60s was a big deal. And a lot of people wanted to be classified 4F so they could avoid going to Vietnam. We had friends, family members who wound up going to Vietnam and never made it back home. But being in ROTC at Tuskegee afforded me the opportunity later on to become a second lieutenant, a commissioned second lieutenant. On my way to Tuskegee, my dad took a high school classmate of mine and me there, or took us part of the way there, because the car broke down. And my dad, as far as I know, never made it to Tuskegee's campus. I don't think he ever saw me on that campus. But my mother I was blessed enough and fortunate enough to have my mother pin my second lieutenant bars on my shoulders when I got commissioned, December the 22nd, 1970. My mother did that. And since both of my parents are going on to glory, that's one of the prized memories and possessions in my life. Tuskegee, to me, was heaven. You hear me? It was pure bliss.
And that's the next question.
I was going to ask you. We was going to ask you about that. And was that also because of it being an HBCU, and because of the times, or can you talk about what made how that college experience during those times?
Sure. Yes, it was because it is an HBCU, and again, for the uninitiated, that's a historically Black college and university. Tuskegee is situated in Tuskegee, Alabama, and that's about 35 minutes or miles east of Montgomery, Alabama. Tuskegee is in Macon County, Alabama, part of what we call the Black Belt here in Alabama. And it's called the Black Belt because of the rich, fertile Black soil, not the fact that there are a lot of Black people in it, in this area of the state, but there are a lot of Black people in this area of the state. And Tuskegee is a predominantly Black town sitting in Macon County, Alabama, which was about 86% African-American, populated by African-Americans when I was there. Sitting in Macon County, Tuskegee is the county seat of Macon County. When I got to Tuskegee, I was amazed at the fact that, first of all, there were people there, students, college kids, my age, a little older, some of them a little younger, but people there from all over the country and from all over the world. That was the first thing that I noticed. Then I noticed that everywhere I turned, African Americans were running everything. And I do mean everything. The president of the university was an African American. The president, the mayor of Tuskegee was an African American. The police chief, Lucius Amos, the sheriff of the county, Macon County, was African American, Lucius Amerson. Tuskegee had, obviously, as a county, had some Black state representatives, businessmen, teachers, doctors, lawyers. Fred Gray, one of our brothers, was an attorney there and a noted civil rights attorney. And it just somehow captivated my attention that we as Black people could do anything and everything. It made me walk a little taller, walk a little prouder, aspire to a little more, and to be told the story of Booker T. Washington, to be told the story of the Tuskegee Airmen, to be told stories about scientists and people like Professor Gomillion. Professor Gomillion was from Mobile, but teaching at Tuskegee, and his name is linked with civil rights in the sense that he was part of a plaintiff class that challenged gerrymandering in Alabama. These people were walking around campus with me. I got to interact with them on a day-to-day basis. My business professor, Dr. Jimmy King Jr., came up to me one day when I was a sophomore and said, "Major, you're going to go to Harvard University this summer." And I almost laughed in the guy's face because I knew a little bit about Harvard. I had never been there, but I had read about it. It's an Ivy League school in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He said, "You're going to Harvard. You and one other person from Tuskegee is going to Harvard, and we got 4 other students, 2 of which will go to Columbia University and 2 of which will go to Yale University." It was called an Intensive Summer Studies Program, ISSP. The purpose of the program was to encourage us as students from an HBCU, and I think there were students from some small white liberal arts colleges as well. But the purpose of the program was to influence us, to encourage us, to inspire us to go beyond getting a baccalaureate degree, a BS degree or a BA degree, and to get advanced studies, a master's degree, a doctorate. They paid our way there and back home from wherever you lived. I happen to live, Boston is a long way from Mobile. It's my first airplane ride ever in the summer of 1968. I flew there, stayed there for 2 months. I lived in the law dorm, Dane Hall, D-A-N-E, Dane Hall. I lived in the law dorm. Imagine that. Imagine that, to later on become a lawyer after living in the law dorm at Harvard University. And I got to see Bobby Seals speak, one of the Black Panthers, at West Roxbury Park in Boston that summer. It was exciting. I also got to hear a guy by the name of William Styron, an author, who wrote The Confessions of Nat Turner, who claimed that Nat Turner had a psychological hangup that a lot of the rich liberal white kids jumped on and said, "We don't necessarily agree with your premise that there was something psychologically wrong with the Black man who wanted to be free. Why would he have to be psychologically demented to want to be free?" And it was amazing to me, the level of academic and social freedom on that campus, because I was walking around with a lot of rich white kids and they didn't hold back on anything. That was another way of showing me, having been allowed to attend that institution, that university, all expenses paid, and to take 2 classes on campus, one of which could be a class of your choosing. The other one was supposed to be a class in your major. And I declared my major as history because they weren't taking majors from applied sciences. Tuskegee didn't have a business school at the time. So the business curriculum was in the School of Applied Sciences. And I got to go because I had taken enough history classes and claim history as a major. It could have been a minor, but it wasn't really my major. Business was my major, but I got to go and take an African American history course at Harvard University. And the other course I took, which could have been any course on campus, was constitutional law.
Bro, Madison, we also got a comment or a question that came in where I was asking, were you there when there was a shooting that took place at Tuskegee?
Oh, not a shooting per se. The spring before I got there, there had been a shooting. A guy by the name of Samuel Young, a Tuskegee student, had been shot and killed. That was sometime in the second semester.
Wow.
The 65, 66 school year. I got there in August of 66. It was that spring prior to my arriving that Samuel Young had been shot and killed. He was an African-American student at Tuskegee, and the guy was downtown Tuskegee. He just wanted to go to the bathroom. He just wanted to use the bathroom. The white proprietor of, I think it was a service station with the restroom on the side of the service station. And he apparently asked to be allowed to use the bathroom, and the service station owner denied him access. And I wasn't there, obviously, when the event actually took place. So I'm telling you all this third hand. What happened is there was some disagreement, verbally or otherwise, and he wound up getting shot dead right there at a service station because he wanted to go to the bathroom. So later that fall, when I got there, the issue was still pretty fresh on everybody's minds in Tuskegee. It was a hot button issue. About 300 students got together and marched downtown to protest the shooting and killing of Samuel Young, Younge. There was an E on the end of his name. I'll never forget that because that was really my first protest movement. That march downtown with 200 or 300 other students from Tuskegee protesting the death of this young brother who just wanted to go to the bathroom. Could have been me. How many times have we been out in public and needed to use the bathroom? That could have been me. And that's why I marched and was glad to march. And what it signaled to me too, though, was that I was at a place of reckoning where I had to either remain on the sidelines and be a member of the crowd or an onlooker, or I had to get in the game. And for me, that was no question but that I wanted to be in the game and stand up for myself and other people like me. Tuskegee afforded us a lot of opportunities that I don't think I ever would have gotten in a non-HBCU setting. I remember being on the back of a business magazine. I think it was Forbes magazine, either Forbes or Business Week. They sent some economists there to lecture at Tuskegee to speak. And somehow or the other, about 13 of us students were chosen to take a picture with the guy. And I wound up on the back cover of Forbes magazine. I got paid. I got paid just to take a picture. We were actually paid because our image, our likeness was going to be published all over the world, wherever that magazine was sold. So they couldn't just rip us off. Well, they could have ripped us off if nobody had been looking out for us, but we got paid to do that.
You know what I'm really enjoying right now, and I'm gonna throw it up to Bro Bosler so he can go on to the next question. But I'm loving the as an HBCU grad, both Brother Marshall and I we're both HBCU grads, and to know that despite the segregation and the open racism, the clear open racism that you all dealt with, there was still such pride in wanting to be able to get your education, not only get your education, but also still fight for what you know that you deserved, especially when you saw the injustice happen. You know, there was a self-instilled pride in the community, in the Black community. And to me, that is so dope. if I can say that. I'm serious. I am just floored, and I have just been listening and just soaking in. I'm like a sponge right now. I'm just soaking so much in. So I did want to say that before we prepare to move on to the next question that Brother Mars is going to ask you. So
And before you move on,
amazing. I'm so grateful.
let me
Honestly.
piggyback off your comment about pride.
Please.
First of all, growing up in the 50s and 60s, education was not something we ever thought about not getting because of our parents and our teachers and our family members and our friends. There was a lot of pride, period, when somebody graduated from high school. The whole family celebrated. And I think too about the first line in my alma mater, my school's alma mater, Tuskegee's alma mater. Tuskegee, the pride of the swift growing South, we pay thee our homage today. For the worth of thy teaching and the joy of thy care and the good we have known neath thy sway. O long striving mother of diligent sons and daughters whose strength is their pride, we will love thee forever and ever shall walk through the oncoming years at thy side. That whole stanza is about pride in your school, in your lineage, your heritage, your willingness to accept the challenge of life and to improve yourself through an education. So yeah, pride is the right word.
With our next question, man, listen, I'm enjoying this, and you know, me and you have a personal relationship through an HBCU that I attended, so we're definitely gonna get to that. We're definitely going to get to that soon. But this next question is definitely something that I wanted to ask. After pledging the greatest fraternity in the world in 1968, how influential was Omega to your life during those harsh times?
How influential was Omega during? I pledged the second semester of my sophomore year. That meant I was online in April of 1968. And for those of you who are students of history, April the 4th, I believe, was the day that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. I was online pledging when I found out Dr. King had been assassinated. And it was one of the saddest
these folk be living in Selma
and darkest moments of my life. Dr. King's assassination. It took a lot of the wind out of my sails and the sails of my line, me and my line brothers. There were 3 other members of the fraternity who pledged with me, Joe Howes, William Reese, and Art Brown. And when we heard that, it was like I had lost a family member, an uncle or a brother or a cousin, or even maybe my father. Dr. King's death caused a huge backlash. His assassination caused a huge backlash in the nation. There were fires that broke out all over America, especially in urban cities, urban areas where there were large Black populations. I think the school decided that it was better to close down. There was also student protests going on before Dr. King was assassinated at Tuskegee. We had a Board of Trustees meeting. The Board of Trustees was meeting at Darkey Hall Guest House on campus. And when they met, students had already decided they wanted to present a list of demands to the board and the president, Dr. Foster. And they did. And it appeared, I guess, for some reason that those demands were not going to be met. And somebody at Tuskegee Institute in 1968 got the bright idea to hold the president of Tuskegee and the board of trustees hostage. Hostage, you hear me? Till their demands were met. This was the era of protest. This is how my life was framed in the 60s. The Vietnam War, civil rights, student protest, the death of Dr. King. John Kennedy was killed in 63 before I went to college. His brother, Robert Kennedy, was assassinated while I was in college. And it seemed for a while that the world was spinning out of control, mainly because people were either coming down on the side of supporting change in the country, especially where it was involving race relations, or they came down on the side of not wanting change to take place. And the school got closed down right after Dr. King and the protest on campus broke out. The National Guards were called. They had armored personnel carriers ringing our campus, Tuskegee. The school was closed down for 2 weeks. Everybody had to go home. We all had to gather up every stitch and stick of anything we had, take it home. And we were told that in 2 weeks, you would probably be back. If you got a letter, you would be able to come back. If you didn't receive a letter, don't come back. And about 115 students got kicked out of school. So those students either sacrificed their education for what they believed in, or some of them might have gone other places and gotten educated. I don't know the stories of all those students who didn't return, but that was what was shaping life on and off campus in the 60s: protests, the Vietnam War, civil rights. And as students, we all figured we had to be a part of it. We were away from home for the first time for most of us, on our own, and growing into manhood and womanhood, and making choices that would shape our lives. Making choices that would shape our lives, probably forever.
Wow. See, man, just hearing that, it's like you were living during a time frame where some of the most monumental deaths and assassinations were abrupt. Like they were right there, and you had to live during those times. And that's why this interview is so important to me, because I was like, I really want to sit down with the male. We've sat down with women. I want to hear a male perspective. And why not one of my frat brothers who I know was at a predominant HBCU during the time frame a lot of this was going on. And I knew you pledged during 6 to 8, and I knew that was a great time and moment to pinpoint this. And that's why I asked the question, like, how influential was Omega to your life during this time?
Yeah, so, I didn't expand on that as much as I got you.
I'm coming with you. I was gonna say, how was the transition with coming back to school, like trying to get back, and I can't say what I want to say, but getting back to where
we stopped pledging. I was kind of happy about that at first. I was kind of happy about that because two of the hardest things I've done physically in my life were pledging and going through ROTC summer camp to become an Air Force officer. Pledging was not easy. It was that. This is 1968. Now we're talking 53 years ago. 53 years ago, pledging was not easy, and so I really was kind of glad school got shut down so we could take a break. And when we got back, the president of the university told all the fraternities and sororities, the Panhellenic Council, said, "Now you all, I know you got your own ideas about how this is going to go with the rest of this semester, because the school, how many times did you have school shut down for 2 weeks in the middle of school, unless it's Christmas vacation? How many times you get school shut down for 2 weeks?" So we came back to school, and the president said to all the fraternities and sororities, those students who were online when we shut down are going to be allowed to go over. And all the fraternities, not just Omega, but all the neophytes especially said, "Oh no, no, they can't tell us what to do. And the president said, either you make sure all of those people pledging do get to finish pledging, or your tenure on this campus could come to an end as a fraternity, as a fraternal sorority organization. So that was an ultimatum. It wasn't an either or. It was, you going to do this. Oh yeah, you're going to do this. So the Neophyte brothers specifically went crazy because the pledge period was being shortened. They had pledged for a full 3.5, almost 4 months. And they didn't want us pledging a second shorter than they had to pledge, especially didn't want us to be automatically considered members of the fraternity at the end of whatever period the school said was going to be the end of pledging. And there was some real raw feelings in Omega about whether or not we were full-fledged brothers at first when we did finish pledging, because of those 2 weeks we missed. And I actually got into, after becoming a member of the fraternity, got into a fairly heated discussion with one of my Neophyte brothers about, look, I'm an Omega. I don't give a what you think about me. I'm an Omega man now. And that didn't sit well with some people. But as time passed, this one particular brother and I got pretty close. We actually both sustained, unfortunately, the loss of a child, a daughter for me and a son for him. This was years after we graduated. And we became as close or closer than almost any of my other brothers. I think I pledged because I didn't have any older brothers. My two brothers, I have two blood brothers. They're younger than me. My two brothers are 7 and 12 years younger than me. So we never got to spend any time together in high school or college, or very much time socializing or dating or riding around, hanging out. And I think I wanted the camaraderie and the fraternity of having not just one, but some big brothers to look out for me, and somebody I could talk with, borrow money from, borrow their car, talk about women. We drank a little wine and liquor then. I can honestly say now, 53 years later, we did a lot of things that may not pass muster, especially for an attorney or the structured organization of an institution of higher education, or even my parents' household for that matter. But it taught me to depend on other people who were dependable, who were trustworthy. It taught me how to be a dependable person, to be held to account for making a statement and sticking to it, to keep my word. I traveled a lot. College afforded me the opportunity to travel a lot. As I said, 1968 going to Harvard was my first airplane ride. And I've traveled halfway around the world since then. Some of it in the military, some of it outside the military, some of it for work, some of it for pleasure. Places like Europe, the Bahamas. College and the fraternity, everywhere I've been, the fraternity has been a way of breaking. It's been an awesome icebreaker. If I want to meet somebody when I travel in a different place, and somebody that I really want to get to know, usually all I have to do is put on an Omega hat or a sweatshirt or a t-shirt. And I've had people in France, a brother in France, come up to me when I had an Omega cap on. I had a brother in Paris, France, come up to me and ask me the questions to verify whether or not I was legitimate. And of course I answered correctly, and we got to talking about the frat back home, America, how wild it was to run into another brother in Europe and have that instant connection and know that if anything were to go down, we both had each other's back. So yeah, the fraternity has meant more than just a way to hang out and party or socialize. And we did do a lot of partying. We had a frat house off the campus. So we did some partying, more than our fair share probably of partying, but it didn't disturb my grades. As a matter of fact, the fraternity, I had a fraternity brother tell me I thought I was going to get into the fraternity just because I was doing well in class. And I had another brother come up to me and say, don't worry about it, don't listen to that. Said, you make sure you keep your grades up. And I'm proud to be considered, possibly you'll be considered one day your brother because of your academic accomplishments. So I was encouraged. I was encouraged to live up to the cardinal principles of manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift, even before I became a member of the fraternity. And that was one of the main reasons I joined. I wanted that kind of camaraderie, that kind of fraternity, that kind of friendship.
I was just about to say there's nothing like that kind of friendship. That's one thing I can agree with. That for years, when you join Omega Psi Phi, you don't necessarily join just a fraternity. You join a circle of friendship. You gain friends everywhere you go, and so definitely, I love how it has shaped everything as far as what you've been through, what you're going through, and just to kind of even take it a step further as far as with education. Can you sort of kind of talk a little bit about your Harvard experience?
And but can you give me a point of privilege for 45 seconds?
You sure can, absolutely.
It's the price of being 72 going on 73. I'll be right back.
Oh man, I love it. While brother attorney Madison takes a quick break, we just want to just remind all of you, please don't forget to take a second and just follow our social media. We do this every Tuesday and Thursday, leading up until the weekend of our Bridge Crossing Jubilee. And it sounds like we're probably going to be making plans to do this after that. And so please continue to just show some love in the comments. Continue to share this video. This is living history, guys. As a political scientist, Brother Marshall is a history teacher. He can tell you that it is so important that moments like these are preserved the best way we can. Brother Carter G. Woodson established Black History Month, which was Negro History Week, because of the fact that our history was not being preserved. Institutions such as America were not preserving our history, or they were rewriting it to something different. And we are literally the corner, like Black people are the cornerstone. And so it's so important that we pay attention to the history that goes on in our area, where we are. You agree with that, bro Marshall?
Yeah, like you were saying, like we've been whitewashed for so long. It's definitely time to bring a lot of things to the forefront. And even with the Major Madison, him not being probably like a big name, the fame or the likeness of a person really doesn't justify the history that they could bring to the table. Because there are people in history who may not have the likeness of a Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks, but they have a story that will be to my or your likeness. Like, I appreciate it because I'm learning things about Tuskegee, about like even the young man being shot and they doing the protest. I've never heard of that. Like, that's something I've never heard of. And hearing those things and being able to bring it to the forefront. And I see he's back, so we're going to give him the floor again. But being able to bring people like himself to the forefront and sharing these moments is definitely detrimental to our African American history.
Absolutely. So yeah, bro Madison, welcome back.
Thank you.
And we just want to just sort of kind of just diving as we continue to dive in. Because I know you also attended Harvard. You talked a little bit about that at the beginning. Can you sort of kind of dive a little bit into your story and your experience, during those polarizing times?
Okay. I was only at Harvard that summer of 1968. I turned 20 on Harvard's campus. My birthday's in July. I was there all of June and all of July. I think I left sometime early August, going back home. The reason I was at Harvard to begin with, as I said earlier, was because an instructor, a professor, Dr. Jimmy King Jr., singled me out among some, I won't say 3,200 students. Tuskegee has averaged somewhere around 3,200, 3,500 students for a long time. I guess they figured that was a good number to make enough money off of tuition and had enough dorm space and classroom space to accommodate that number comfortably. But out of, I won't say 3,200 students, but out of however many students that were in my sophomore year who were majoring in business, Dr. King picked me out. He singled me out. I didn't ask him anything. I didn't walk up to him and say, "Hey, Dr. King, what do you got?" He singled me out to tell me, not to ask me or to encourage. He singled me out to tell me, "You're going to Harvard University." I was actually ticked off because I wanted to go to New York City. I wanted to go to Columbia University because Columbia is in New York. When I found out there were going to be 6 students from Tuskegee and 6 students from the other schools too, but 6 from Tuskegee, 2 to Harvard, 2 to Yale, and 2 to Columbia, I wanted to go to New York City. I did get to go to New York City anyway that summer from Harvard, but I didn't get to go all summer long to Columbia and New York. I got to Harvard and looked around, and it was different in a kind of exploratory way. I was an explorer at Harvard University. I never felt like a Harvard student. I felt like a college student at Harvard. I never felt like a Harvard student because I 2 months wasn't enough time for me to get to find out what it must truly be like to be a Harvard student. But what I did get was a sense of openness, a sense of academic challenge, a sense of academic excellence, a sense of we don't want to put any obstacles in your way to learn. Well, after all, the program, the consortium, Harvard, Yale, and Columbia, paid for us to come up there. We didn't pay them to enroll in school. They paid us. They paid our tuition. They paid our room and board. They gave us a $500 cashier's check at the end of that summer. And for some of you who say $500, I know, this is 1968, people. 53 years ago. $500 is a lot of money. As a matter of fact, with that $500, they paid for my way back home, so I didn't have to buy an airplane ticket. They gave us a credit card. That was my first credit card. Harvard University gave Major Madison Jr. from Maysville, Mobile, Alabama, a credit card. I didn't have any income. Had never dreamt about getting a credit card at that time. I later on got my own, but I had not. They gave us a credit card to the books. We could go to the bookstore, to places of business in and around Cambridge, Massachusetts, and use the card. And I did. I didn't burn a hole in it, but I used it. I actually flew when I left from Boston to Fort Wayne, Indiana, where one of my sisters lived, and one of my younger sisters was visiting with my older sister. I actually paid for my younger sister's airplane fare from Fort Wayne, Indiana to Mobile, Alabama. And my sister, younger sister, well, both of them, but my younger sister in particular still remembers to this day that trip because it was her first time on an airplane. Her big brother took her for an airplane ride with the money Harvard University paid me when I left. But being there, as I said, I took an African-American history course and a constitutional law course. The African-American history course was taught by a somewhat young white male PhD candidate. He wasn't a doctor. He was working on his doctorate. He was probably what we call normally a graduate assistant, but he was working on his doctorate. And his major area of study, I want to say, was Chinese history. It wasn't even African-American history. This guy told us, I wish I could remember his name, but I don't. He told us there were about, we had cohorts of about 5, 6 students, nothing large, really small cohorts, which is where you gain even more knowledge in cohorts of other students, but small enough cohorts that you get to interact on an extended basis and in depth and in detail. This PhD candidate told us, African-American students, that he probably was going to learn more about African-American history from us than we learned from him. And guess what? He was right. He was right. We studied, we read, assigned readings. We got to write a paper before that summer was over. The topic of my paper was Booker T. Washington, Uncle Tom or Miracle Maker. Booker T. Washington, the founder of my college, Tuskegee Institute, Uncle Tom or Miracle Maker. And I had to research what his life had meant and what his worth was to Tuskegee, to college professors, college students, Alabama farmers, because Tuskegee has a long, rich history of working with farmers in the surrounding community. It has an agricultural program. But at Harvard, this professor told us the truth. He said, I will probably learn more about African-American history from you students than you'll learn from me. And that paper caused me to rethink even more, more deeply delve more deeply into the subject of what really went on at Tuskegee Institute in 1881 when Booker T. Washington came there from Hampton Institute, Virginia. The 1800s, 1881, was 16 years after the end of the Civil War. Civil War ended in 1865. Tuskegee was founded in 1881. That's 16 years after the end of the Civil War. Reconstruction took 10 years. And at the end of what ended Reconstruction was some agreement made between President Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Abraham Lincoln. The deal was struck to pull federal troops out of the South so that Southerners could regain control of the South, because Blacks were gaining land, money, jobs, property, the right to vote. The most Black elected officials in this country up until the last 25 or 50 years were elected in the years immediately following the Civil War. And white Southerners shuddered at the thought of Blacks taking political control of their own lives and of the states, cities, towns, counties, and states where they live. That's what I found out about how important and how meaningful what Booker T. Washington did was that he could found a Black college in the heart of Alabama, 16 years after the end of the Civil War. He got one of the smartest individuals in the world, a Black Missouri kid who went to Iowa State University, a scientist. How many of you know who the scientist was? George Washington Carver, to come to Tuskegee, who really put Tuskegee on the map. But he put it on the map with something as simple as crop rotation. Southern farmers were growing so much cotton. Cotton was a cash crop. They were growing so much cotton all over the South, and especially in Alabama, that they were stripping the soil of some of its most valuable nutrients. George Washington Carver said, it's okay to grow cotton, but don't just grow cotton. Grow other crops too, which will help replenish the nutrients that cotton plants are taking from the soil, so that your yield will increase and you'll make more money by growing more crops. Carver had so many patents, it wasn't funny when he died. I was told that when he died, he had numerous checks that he had never even put in the bank, hadn't even cashed them. Numerous checks. He wasn't interested in money. He was interested in helping his people. And as a result of that, he helped put Tuskegee on the world map worldwide. But it was started by Booker T. Washington. We don't always know what leadership is and what it means often until we don't have it. Booker T. Washington was a leader. He wasn't an Uncle Tom. He asked white people for money because that's who had the money. Black people didn't have any money in 1881 to speak of, not enough to start a school. Dr. Rosa Jency Young, who's from Camden, Wilcox County, Alabama, wrote Booker T. Washington when she was trying to start the school that you, Calvin Marshall, attended. It was called Alabama Lutheran Academy and College before it was called Concordia College. Dr. Rosa Jency Young wrote Booker T. Washington asking him for help financially. He told her she needed to talk to those Lutherans, one of which I am by denomination, and they helped her get started. But Dr. Young didn't have any money. So there has always been this issue of money. And then all that links back to the paper I wrote about Booker T. Washington, Uncle Tom, a Miracle Maker, at Harvard University, and the professor's class who told us we would teach him more about African American history than he could teach us. He was right. The other class was constitutional law, and I think that has something to do with my finally winding up going to law school. I'm going to leave it at that.
Wow. That's definitely deep.
It is.
That's definitely deep.
I think I want to say really quick. I'm just going to say that I love the perspective and how you shaped Booker T. Washington, because I grew up listening to the debate between W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, and the contrast between the two, and how Booker T. he was always looked at as the person who sold out for Black people. So if you still have that paper dissertation, I would love to see that.
I wish I did. I really do. Maybe I can write Harvard University and find out if they have it in their archive somewhere. But I wasn't smart enough to keep it. I was too happy to get my tuition paid for, my room and board paid for, and a $500 cashier's check when I left. The people was secondary to me. I was going back to Tuskegee, where all that was already. And interestingly enough, I didn't go back to Tuskegee though. Well, I did. I went back at the beginning of my junior year, 68, 69 school year. I went back to Tuskegee, registered for school, and the day after I registered, I took off to Atlanta, Georgia. I was on a cooperative program.
Okay.
Set up by Dr. King, the same person who sent me to Harvard University, told me he wanted me to take advantage of a co-op program, which is just working while you're in college.
Right.
That's all a cooperative program is, right. Getting a job while you're in college. That actually takes you away from your studies, but it gives you the real world experience of the workaday world. I was a business major. What was I going to know about business if I didn't work before I finished college? I wound up going to work for Defense Contract Administration Services Region. It's called DCASA for short. The acronym was DCAS, or Defense Contract Administration Services Region, where I was auditing small dollar balances on Defense Department contracts for the Southeastern United States. That came into play later on at my job at Langston University, where I was Institutional Advancement Vice President, and we helped to bring defense contracting to Langston University in my department, my division, the university's Institutional Advancement Division. Made over $5 million for the school, and a tenth of that as manager of the project was unrestricted income to Langston University, $500,000. The president could use any way he wanted. Tied all the way back into working out at the CASA in 1969.
Awesome.
That's awesome. We have like one more question, and then we're not gonna hold you for the rest of the night. But you're definitely a resident of Selma, and you know where we all are, and we just wanted to know, you know, with all the history that you bring to the table, with you moving to and from, what sparked you to move to Selma and make a difference in the community?
That's an easy one. The decision was easy. To answer that question is easy too. I was working at Langston University for 6 years, from 1997 to 2003, and I got a call from a gentleman out of the Lutheran Church asking me to consider a job with the Lutheran Church raising money, because at that time I was raising money for a historically black college and university, or university, Langston University. And my church thought, I guess they thought they needed my help, or they needed somebody black to put a different picture on the church's image. And I was asked to consider taking a job at the foundation in St. Louis, Missouri, of the Lutheran Church. I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it, and never made up my mind. I just didn't. And about a year and a half later, after I was offered that job, I came home one day mad about something at work. I told my wife, I said, I'm thinking about leaving. I want to do something else. I wonder if that job that the church offered me is still open. She said, honey, that job is probably gone. Or she asked me, well, what about that job? I said, that job is probably gone. That's been over a year that they offered me that. She said, why don't you call them and see? So I called and asked about the job that I had been offered over a year before that. And they said, yeah, it's gone, but you need to talk to Dr. Julius Jenkins in Selma, Alabama at Concordia College. And they gave somebody, I think the person who told me that gave me his phone number, or I got it somehow, and called Dr. Jenkins. And a few weeks after I called Dr. Jenkins, I was on an airplane flying into Birmingham, renting a car, driving down to Selma, Alabama, running around Selma and on Concordia's campus. The mulling over whether or not to accept the position of a development officer at Concordia. We talked 2 days. We talked twice over the course of 2 days. And after the second day, I was convinced that I was going to give it a shot and come back home, because it was coming back home, not to Mobile, Alabama, but coming back to Alabama from Oklahoma. And what it meant to me was working at the only black Lutheran college in America, Lutheran Church Missouri Synod College in America, and HBCU. My church, the place where two of my sisters had attended school, and one of them had taught for a semester, I believe, for one semester. A place where the minister who baptized me has his name, or had his name, on one of the dormitories, Reverend Albert Dominic. He was a secretary for higher education in Alabama for a long time among black congregations, and education on the education board. And I thought that it was worthwhile to come back to Alabama and to do something for an institution that was really close to my family's hearts and mine as well, I believed. And I still believe that. It hurt my heart when Concordia closed. It hurt my heart. I had been separated something like 6-7 years before it closed. I left in 2008, 2 days before Thanksgiving, a Tuesday before Thanksgiving in 2008. And that's why I came to Selma, to raise money for a black Lutheran college. I did some good. I don't know that I did enough good. I don't hold myself personally accountable for the school closing now, but I often wondered, and still wonder, whether or not I gave it my all, and how much more I could have done. I don't worry about other people, because I'm not responsible for other people's actions. But I wonder to this day sometimes, was there more I could have done? Or we all could have done, but me especially, to help keep that school viable and alive. But it wasn't meant to be. But that's why I wound up in Selma, not to practice law, to work for Concordia College, raising money.
That's definitely man an amazing story, and we sincerely appreciate like everything that you talked about tonight. Like it's definitely from top to bottom for me. And even at the end, we share a special place in each other's hearts with the school. And man, it's just been an amazing understanding to know your role to where you are now and just hearing your story. Man, we appreciate you, man. We love you, and we thank you for your time. I'm gonna turn it over to Brother Collins Pettaway III, and we're gonna get ready to wrap it up.
Yes, sir. Once again, thank you so much, Brother Madison. We just want to just remind everybody that these videos do stay up, so please feel free to share them out. Make sure that you are following us on Facebook and Instagram at Omega Chi 1957. And then please make sure that you are subscribing to our YouTube channel and just type Omega Chi 1957. And then you'll be able to find us for not just these events, but also everything that we're doing down here, not just in the Selma area, but in the Alabama Black Belt as a whole.
And thank you too for what you do for Omega and for manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift.
Hey, we're here to serve. Rude. Once again, thank y'all. Thank y'all so much for tuning in tonight. We're signing off. You all have a great night.
Thank you.